how the priestess wound shows up in daily life. Hello, beautiful souls, and welcome back. Today, I want to talk about something that I think many spiritually aware women are experiencing without even realizing it. We are going to explore how the priestess wound shows up in daily life, in our relationships, in our purpose and mission, in our intuition, in our businesses, and of course, in our abundance, prosperity, and wealth. Because the priestess wound isn't just something that affects us spiritually, it affects the way that we live, the way that we show up, and in the decisions that we make as well. And often it influences our lives far more than we realize. Now, if you're new to this work, let me briefly explain what I mean by the priestess wound. So, the priestess wound is an emotional wound. It's not the same as the witch wound. The witch wound is often connected to danger, persecution, and punishment, whereas the priestess wound is about emotional safety. It's the emotional imprint that tells us it's not safe to fully express ourselves, to speak our truth, to be fully seen. It's not so safe to trust ourselves or our gifts. It's not safe for us to step into leadership or power. And because this wound is emotional, it tends to show up in very practical ways throughout our lives. So let's explore some of those today. So I thought we'd start with relationships because often this is one of the first places that the priestess wound reveals itself. Many women carrying the priestess wound struggle to fully express themselves within their relationships, whether that be romantic or whether that be, partnerships, family, whatever relationship you are in. They have a tendency to hold back their feelings, to avoid difficult conversations, or struggle to express their wants, needs, and desires. And they might not even realize that they're doing it. Instead, they become focused on everybody else's wants, needs, and desires, everybody else's happiness, everybody else's comfort. And over time, they begin abandoning themselves. Maybe you stay quiet because you want to avoid conflict, or maybe you don't ask for what you need because you fear rejection. Or maybe you convince yourself that your needs are less important than everybody else's. But eventually, something begins to happen. You start to feel disconnected from those around you, disconnected from yourself. You may start to feel resentful or even unseen. And not because necessarily the relationship is unhealthy, but because you never fully allowed yourself to be seen within it. And because true intimacy requires a vulnerability, it requires honesty, and it requires us to let people into the deeper parts of ourselves. And when we're emotionally protecting ourselves, we often build walls around our hearts. And sometimes these walls develop because of childhood experiences, sometimes through past relationships, and sometimes through ancestral conditioning, and even sometimes through experiences that feel much older than this lifetime. So the priestess wound often creates emotional armor. But while that armor may protect us from pain, it can also prevent us from experiencing genuine connection. So maybe ask yourself, where have I been silencing my truth within my relationships? Where have I been afraid to express my needs? And where have I been choosing emotional protection over emotional connection? So now let's talk about purpose, because this is a huge one. So many spiritually aware women know that they're here for something more. They feel that calling, they feel the pull, and they know that there's something within them that wants to be shared, and yet they hold back. And it's not because they don't care, and not because they're not capable, but because the priestess wound often creates emotional resistance around stepping into leadership or stepping into visibility and being fully seen. It can make us question ourselves constantly. Who am I to do this? Who am I to teach? Who am I to lead? Who am I to share my gifts? What if I'm not good enough? What if I get it wrong? What if people judge me? What if people don't listen? And beneath many of these questions is a deeper emotional wound around worthiness. Not feeling worthy enough, not feeling capable enough, not feeling ready enough. And because of that, we delay our purpose and we stay hidden. We play small, we wait until we're more qualified, more confident, more healed, and more ready. But the truth is, many women aren't waiting because they need more knowledge. They're waiting because they don't yet feel emotionally safe stepping forward into their power. The Priestess Wound often tells us, stay where it's comfortable, stay where it's familiar, stay where nobody expects anything from you. But your soul knows you're here for more. And healing this wound often means allowing yourself to step forwards before you feel completely ready. So maybe ask yourself, where am I shrinking my purpose? Where am I holding back my gifts? And where am I allowing emotional fear to keep me from my mission? So it also shows up in intuition and self-trust. So this wound can show up through your intuition. And many women know their intuition is speaking. They receive guidance, they receive nudges, messages, or they feel things really deeply and then immediately second guess themselves. They ask everyone else, so they're seeking validation or looking for proof or searching for certainty. And anything except trusting themselves. And the Priestess Wound often creates a deep disconnect from self-trust, not because your intuition isn't accurate, but because somewhere along the way you learned it wasn't safe to trust yourself. Perhaps you were told you were wrong, you were too sensitive, too emotional, too intuitive, too different. And over time, you stop trusting in your own inner knowing. And the result? You know the answer, but you don't follow it. You feel the guidance, but you don't act on it. You hear your intuition, but you trust everyone else's opinion more than your own. And healing the Priestess Wound means rebuilding that relationship with yourself, learning to trust your knowing again, learning to honor your intuition, learning to believe that your inner guidance matters. So maybe ask yourself, where am I ignoring what I already know? And what would happen if I trusted myself a little bit more? So now let's talk about money and abundance, prosperity, even wealth, right? Because this wound absolutely affects abundance. Many spiritual aware women have been conditioned to believe that giving is spiritual, but receiving is not. That serving is spiritual, but wealth is somehow selfish. That helping others is noble, but receiving support in return feels uncomfortable. And because of this, many women develop a complicated relationship with abundance, wealth, and prosperity. Not because they consciously dislike money, but because emotionally they don't feel safe receiving attention, receiving support, receiving recognition, receiving abundance. And the Priestess Wound often creates the belief that staying in lack is somehow safer. Safer than standing out, safer than being successful, safer than receiving more than others, or safer than being visible. And yet abundance is simply another form of energy. A healthy flow requires both giving and receiving. If we were always giving but never allowing ourselves to receive, the flow becomes blocked. So ask yourself, do I truly feel safe receiving? Do I believe that I'm worthy of abundance? Or am I unconsciously keeping abundance at a distance because it feels emotionally uncomfortable? And finally, let's talk about business and expansion, because this is where I see the Priestess Wound show up most often. You know you're meant for more, you know your gifts can help people, you know that your work matters, and yet every time your business begins growing, every time visibility increases, every time expansion begins happening, something inside you wants to pull back. You stop showing up. You hesitate, you overthink, you delay, you second guess yourself. Not because you don't want to grow, but because growth feels emotionally unsafe. Expansion means being seen. Visibility means being witnessed. Success means more people seeing your work. And for many women carrying the priestess wound, that feels vulnerable. The wound whispers, stay small, stay hidden, don't draw attention to yourself, don't take up too much space. But your soul came here to be visible, not for ego, not for attention, but because your gifts cannot help people if they remain hidden. So maybe ask yourself, where am I playing small and where am I holding myself back? And where am I allowing emotional fear to limit my expansion? The priestess wound isn't something that only affects spiritual work. It affects every area of our lives. Our relationship, our purpose, our intuition, our abundance, our business. Because at its core, it's a wound around emotional safety. And the more we begin recognizing these patterns, the more we begin reclaiming our voice, our gifts, and our power. And I'd love to know which areas resonated with you the most. Let me know in the comments. And if you'd like to explore the priestess wound more deeply, I'll link some additional videos and resources below for you. Until next time, beautiful soul, your voice matters, your gift matters, and you are safe to be seen. With love. Ciao for now.